Hey guys, everybody here kind of already knows me. We've been meeting in our PLC group. Today I want to give a little presentation on something I've been working on for my master's class, but it's directly related to the things that are going on in my in-school suspension class. So what I chose to focus on is the character education aspect of what I do in the in-school suspension program and how that can improve the behavior referrals that we have that are sent down to me. So just kind of introduce it. I took the behavior data from last year and I started to look and dive into it a little bit, and it was somewhere around 700 and some odd referrals last year to ISS. And for such a small school, I think that's a pretty staggering number. So I searched for some ways to improve, student behavior. What were other schools doing that worked? And so what I kind of ran into is a lot of schools were already using the 7 habits as a method to try and improve behavior. And since we're already using that, I thought that would be a perfect way to kind of segue them from elementary to middle and then on up into us. So my action research project specifically targeted 9th through 12th grade kids and seeing how effective the 7 habits of highly effective teens would be with those kids that are placed in ISS with me. And so the purpose, like I just kind of said, is to help students improve their behavior in the classroom, in your classroom, not just in ISS. To help develop a solid foundation of character traits so that they would be more responsible students, and then determine the impact of the program also on the kids that I have in Apex, because I have some kids that are down there full-time doing all of their classwork on Apex. So I would hope that maybe some of the benefits that the ISS kids were getting from this, the Apex kids would also get. Before I started the action research, I did a little lit review. I did 4 different pieces. The first one here is reducing behavior problems in the elementary school classroom. I know that's not entirely the same as what we deal with here at the high school and middle school, but there are some things that they do that make sense. It recommends that teachers actively teach students social and behavior skills and to use strategies to try and make that better in the classroom. I thought that was important. It doesn't matter what level you're at, whether it's the high school or the elementary. To manage consequences and to reinforce students' display of positive replacement behaviors and adaptive skills. The other way is to have the frequency in which you acknowledge students' good behavior as well as their bad behavior. And they say that you should have 4 positive statements for every 1 corrective statement. The next one is an evidence review of character education interventions. They define character education as things that deal with respect, responsibility, trustworthiness, fairness, caring. I think we all agree that if our students were to have those traits, that would eliminate a lot of the behavior issues we have in our class. They say that character education programs are primarily designed to promote values, which would be good across everything, and that that's a good way to prevent conflicts and violence. The next one is a study that used big brothers and sisters as a mentoring type character education. It's a small case study. They used people from the community, former students, older students, and they showed statistically showed improvement when a student had an older mentor to kind of guide them and show them what was acceptable behavior. And then the last one is the effects of social development. And basically in this one, teachers received 5 days of training in classroom management, And then students are taught the social skills at the beginning of school. I think this one was a really good one because it gave the teachers good training, and then the kids were taught what the teachers had, and then they implemented that right away, straight at the beginning of school. And so it also offered classes for parents to come in with their kids if their kid was having trouble staying on task, getting in trouble. And so that was a way to get the parents involved, which we all know that can be an issue sometimes, but when you get those parents involved, it makes a big difference in what you're trying to do. And of course, that's just the references. So my first research question for what I wanted to do in my class is, what effect does the character education and social skills development program, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, have on 9th through 12th grade students' behavior referrals to in-school suspension? So, we've already talked a little bit about this, but I'll elaborate a little more. What was my justification? That one, students that are assigned to ISS and APEX struggle with behavior issues in the general classroom setting. We all can see that. When I get a kid in ISS with me, it means they're not in your classroom. And so when they're not with you, with your specialty, doing the things that you do day to day, they're gonna struggle. I mean, I can't provide them the same, type of instruction that you can, since, it's your class. Students that are out of class fall behind, like I just said, makes it harder for them to catch up. So then when they come to me, they're getting behind on not only what they're supposed to be doing at the time, but then, what you guys are moving on to. That kind of leads into a vicious cycle that as a student falls behind, when they do come back to your classroom in school suspension, they're behind, so they're likely to have more behavior issues. And then students that meet behavior expectations in the classroom are more likely to be successful. So here I had a small sampling. I'll jump ahead a little bit. I broke this down into the 3 9 weeks, the 3 quarters. And to use my baseline, I used 15 students, grades 9 through 12, that were assigned to me in the first quarter. That was actually every kid. I had 15 total students assigned to me in that time span. There were 7 girls, 8 boys, 14 Caucasian, 1 African American, and 2 with an IEP. That's kind of the split with the boys and girls, nothing uncommon. And then the Caucasian to African American, that's really not uncommon with our demographic here either. What did I try to do as far as when I started to get the data and break it down? I provided clear expectations in my ISS room. If any of you have ever been down there, the rules are clearly written on the board. Each kid is actually given a rule sheet. I'll explain that in the next slide. And they have a contract, that rule sheet, that they have to write every day that they come in, what the rules and expectations for ISS are. It shows also the purpose of the program is to hold students accountable for their behavior, and that education cannot proceed effectively without good, consistent discipline. And then I had them also complete the 7 habits handouts and read scenarios and do little self-reflection sheets. Here's an example of my rule sheet. You can kind of see it outlines everything, and then in the spaces, the student has to write those rules, sign a date, I sign a date, and then it goes in their file. It clearly outlines the rules and expectations, and then we are all on the same page to know this is what is expected of you while you're in ISS. And I hope that will eventually trickle down into their regular classroom once they get out. They also complete what I call a think sheet. First question says, what behavior led to this consequence? What were you thinking or feeling at the time? When they complete that think sheet gives them a chance to reflect. That's something straight out of 7 habits. And it lets them think about what they did, what could they have done better, and what will they do next time. And then some goal setting ones. A lot of our kids don't really have a clear goal, an end in mind. as the 7 habits would say. And so that's another sheet that they work on about short-term and long-term goals. Character journal ideas. These are 30 things for them to write and talk about. I'm just giving an example. Describe or name 3 character traits that are important to you and why. Or describe a time when you had a good sense of humor and why it was important to have a good sense of humor. Different scenarios, different things to get them thinking about character traits, what would be, appropriate answers. And then there are several of these. I just put one of, it has a little picture, and then it'll ask several questions about what's going on in the picture. What do you think's going on? What could be done to improve this situation if you were either, this girl or these girls sitting up front? My data collection comes straight from Infinite Campus. What I did was I pulled every behavior referral for the first, second, and third 9 weeks. To get that baseline, I just used the first quarter. And it compares the first to the second and third. And then that determines my effectiveness on each student and whether they decrease or increase the number of referrals. So this is the baseline data. You look down through there, I've got male, female, and I left it, anonymous. But the colors here represent, green means they're a part-time apexer. They come to me maybe 1 or 2 or 3 periods a day. The yellow are the full-time apex. That means they're with me all day long, never leave. And then the white are just students that are placed in ISS for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, whatever they are assigned, depending on what they got trouble for. The orange are students that are no longer enrolled at Government. They've left the district for whatever reason. And when I get to some of the data from second and third quarter, it throws things off, in my opinion, a little bit and makes the numbers a little bit, unrealistic. But like I said earlier, there's 15 students, 8 male, 7 female, 2 students with an IEP. Most students, if you'll look down through here, I've got 1 with 8, 1 with 7, 1 with 6. Most everyone else have 1 or 2 referrals. And so I thought that was good that our kids, for the most part, were getting in trouble and then not coming back, except for a few repeat offenders. Breakdown, just to give you a visual, 73% of the students only had 1 or 2 referrals if you put these 2 together. Most students don't return, like I said. Only 27 are what I call repeat offenders, and they continue to get in trouble, regardless of what was going on. Breakdown of the demographics. It's pretty split with male and female, not really anything to draw a conclusion about. And on the IEP, only 13% had an IEP, so very low number of kids with an IEP making it down to my room. If you break down the overall data, see the yellow column is that first quarter, that's the baseline. Then I've got my second and third quarter numbers. And then the last column here, I put the average of the second and third. Blue means they met the goal. They, showed improvement from, like for instance, 2 to 0 shows improvement. Where red, they did not. They went from 2 to an average of 4. So they did not meet the goal. So, as you look down through there, there's some that I can give you an example of. Student 6 had 8 in the first quarter. She's no longer with us. Actually, she left in the middle of the second quarter. So her numbers went 8, 3, 0. Showed improvement, but she's not here to be referred. So that kind of, in my opinion, throws the numbers off slightly. But 7 out of 15 showed improvement by lowering the number of referrals that they had to ISS. It's a breakdown of each quarter. Pretty spot on until you get to the third. And like I said, in my opinion, there's a few of those students that are no longer here, which lowered that third quarter number. Could it be that the program is working? Yes, I think it is actually working somewhat. I mean, you've got 7 out of 15 showing improvement. But it does slightly skew the numbers a little bit. If you kind of compare it overall, here's another visual. 47 showed improvement, 13 nothing, they just stayed the same, and then 40% declined. So my analysis of the data is that there's a limited number of students with a high volume. Most only have one or two, and I feel that it had a limited impact. Not to say that ISS is not working. I'm just saying that I think that maybe the 7 Habits approach was not the best that we could use. Approximately half students showed improvement or no change. And like I said, the results, in my opinion, are slightly skewed. So we'll come back to that. Reflection on the question that I had. It's given me an opportunity to kind of evaluate how I do things in ISS. This is the first year that I'm doing this. I've done history all my years before this. I think that it was a really good process, the Action Research Project. Let me really pull and break down a lot of different data and kind of determine how effective I was being in my room. I could see how this would be very beneficial for anybody in just, say my U.S. history class on test scores, different things, maybe attendance of the student, how many absences do they have, how does that correlate to their grade. It gives me a way to measure my class as a whole and each individual. Helps me determine my strengths and weaknesses and what I could do to be better in my ISS room. Now moving on to the next section. If you guys remember, I had you do a survey a couple weeks ago. It was called the mid-year survey. And so this next question asks, what strengths and challenges does the mid-year survey reveal about the RTI and behavior PLC group, us? Breaking down people in the room, I know it's kind of funny with us all being here, but it's a PLC team with 6 members, 2 admins, 1 principal, 1 guidance counselor, 4 regular high school teachers, 2 special ed, a PE, and then a math. What did the survey look like? You guys remember? It was 4 pages. I chose this because it was called the midpoint survey and or mid-year survey, and we were just past the midpoint. And so I think this gives us a clear understanding of how effective our PLCs are being and what we can do, to make changes going forward. Breakdown, you guys remember what this looks like. It's 1 through 4. It's got questions, you rate them. It's pages 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4. How did I go about this approach? I handed the surveys out to you guys on our faculty meeting, since we only meet monthly except for this special occasion. And then each teacher completes on their own time. You did that, you turned it in unanimously, no names, and then put that back in my mailbox. How did I break this down? Well, there's 2 sections. One was meeting management, and then the other was about teaching and learning tasks. And then the survey used the scale of 1 to 4, with 1 being very true and 4 being not true. 28 total questions. These are the sections that I broke it down into, and I'll talk about those as we go. I'm not going to read them all. But I thought that breaking it down into these 7 sections gave it easier for me to analyze and then kind of determine what areas we were strong and weak in. So here are a few of the areas that I thought we had strengths. Norms was one section. What was the relevance of this? It talked about expectations for behaviors during meetings. How do you act? We all want our kids to act a certain way when we're teaching. How are you supposed to act during meetings? What's the consistency and effectiveness of the norm? My analysis of this section is that the majority feel like norms are clearly outlined. We all agree, and everybody understands the expectations. A third feel, though, that the norms are not clearly outlined. You can kind of look as we go through these. The green in this section kind of go together, and then this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you look, 67% are on board. Only a small amount are not feeling good about that norm section. The next one is task. Are there clear tasks when we meet for our PLC? Are they related to student goals? And who determines the agenda of our actual meeting? Is it a teacher? Are we all coming together? Is it an administrator? What is it? There's pretty good numbers on this one again. 71% are, majority feel like there are clear tasks when we meet. And the only thing that I got out of some of the questions that I specifically looked at are that teachers would like more input on what tasks are being addressed when we develop the agenda. So maybe all of us have a little more input on what the agenda looks like so that we can address things that we feel are important. The next one's learning goals. This one was really good in my opinion. It looked at student learning goals and how well each member knows them. The staff feel like, my analysis is that they have a clear understanding of the learning goals, and that to develop student learning goals are more clear to reach with 34%, that are struggling with this. But we had good numbers on that in my opinion. Last strength is instructional practice. That looks at how well we implement interventions, and then it reflects on our teaching. How well do we reflect on our teaching and what we're doing in the classroom, how effective that is. And 73% felt that we did a pretty good job on that. Staff is consistent when using the same process. If you go from room to room, you can see those things taking place in every classroom. There's consistency. Weaknesses. Conversation was the section, that we had a weakness. The relevance of this, what happens when there are disagreements in the PLC? Do people do a good job of voicing their concerns or their opinions? And do we avoid difficult topics, when those come up? My analysis of that section was that the staff is not completely comfortable in expressing our thoughts with one another, and we tend to avoid those difficult topics. So maybe we could do a better job of just having open communication and trying to address, those difficult issues with one another. Another weakness, common assessment. That looks at, how we develop common assessments, develop rubrics, analyze and assess work. I feel that the staff, this is just what the data is telling me, that the staff does not regularly use common assessments, and I'll, jump on that a little bit with, we're so small, there's not a whole lot of, there's only Miss Graves here, there's only one Miss Graves that teaches, math. And so there's not a whole lot of common assessments being, we're not a big school with multiple teachers teaching the same subject. So it kind of makes sense that this might be a weak area. Next one is team practice. This looks specifically at, our attachments to this PLC team, what continuation of this team that we're going to have, and then any changes to teaching practice that come of us meeting. I felt that a large percentage felt that there's not a whole lot of change taking place in their instruction day to day because of the meetings that we have. Most would not, actually this is one question specifically, it said, most of us would not continue to meet in this PLC if it were not required. And I know that we have so many things going on, but I think if this was, some of those things, if we focus on some of those strengths and weaknesses, it could make it, very effective. So this is an overview of the strengths again. The norms are clearly outlined. We do a good job of that. Clear task, clear understanding of our learning goals, and confident that the interventions are being implemented. Our weaknesses are that we're not really comfortable in expressing our thoughts with one another, and that we don't regularly use common assessments, which I kind of, explained that too. And then most would not meet if it were not required. What actions could we take to focus on our weaknesses? Maybe some team building exercises. I know that at my previous school we used to go bowling at the beginning of the school year every year. It's kind of fun just to get everybody out. Involve teachers in the planning of the PLC time. I know we meet a lot of times on our early release Fridays. Maybe it would be nice if we had input on the agenda to what we would actually do on those early release. I know sometimes we feel like some of the things that we do on those early release Fridays are not, very beneficial. And then PLC time devoted to focus on common assessments. Hold on a second. And then lastly, my reflection on that question is I allowed myself and my PLC to see what strengths and weaknesses we have, and then each member completing the survey was honest. I thought that was beneficial to determine, make us aware of all of our weaknesses. And that's it.